Many of us have learned during perimenopause that this phase is a lot more than just nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle. It's about having the right mindset to tackle the changes that we face as we transition into this 10 to 15 years into menopause with over 40 symptoms. Perimenopause can feel quite challenging without the right knowledge and support. So let me introduce you to Kylye. Her expertise is coaching women on their mindset during perimenopause. Her work is to assist women just like you and me during this period that can feel like a midlife crisis as our hormones decline. You can find Kylye on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and of course, her website. As she so cleverly said during this interview, you're not supposed to do this alone. I can't wait for you to hear from Kylye herself. So without further ado, let's dive into it.
I'm Kylye, and I am a midlife coach. I'm here to offer women a new perspective about the way that they think about midlife, from perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause, one that is really filled with magic and mystery and power, and one that really looks at menopause as a rite of passage that is undertaken through a biological, physiological, psychological, and spiritual process. I saw this thing happening with women where they were feeling like something was missing. They were feeling like they didn't have purpose. They were having all of these symptoms. They were feeling like they were going crazy and they didn't know what was happening. And they were feeling a disconnect with their partners and so much stress. And I have to attribute most of that to perimenopause. I think that our life in general is full of so much beauty and so much tragedy. And we kind of get to decide what we think about life. Like there's the circumstances and we can't really change the circumstances. I mean, menopause, for example, is mandatory attendance, right? But we can change the way that we look at it. And I think that's a really big statement because it's a really hard thing to do because we're fighting against our patriarchal society and the way that we are conditioned. And we're fighting against the media that is showing us that we're supposed to be a certain way. And we're living in this space where we're going to go through the change, but no one's defined what it is. So we're fighting against all of those things. And so I truly believe that it starts with our mindset. And for me, with the mindset is about becoming curious, having a sense of wonder, having a sense of awe, finding a way to mystify the things that are happening in your life. And you know, some people are like, you cannot do that with menopause. That is not something that we're going to be able to mystify. But I disagree because I think there's so many beautiful things in it that we can look at, and that we need to really define, not just redefine menopause, but to define what we're becoming in the change. We only ever got to, and they live happily ever after. But we get to write that. We get to write that whether we choose to pick up the pen or not. So what is happily ever after? What does it look like for you? Who do you want to be? What do you want to have in your life? And you're right. We're children, and some of us are prepared for puberty and some of us aren't, which I believe is the first rite of passage. And I believe menopause is the second rite of passage that we have as women. And we know that we're turning into a woman, at least even by the fairy tales, as you brought up. We know that we're supposed to get married and have a house and have a career and that everything's going to be amazing as soon as we get there. But the average age of a woman is 81. And the average age of that is like, what, 40, right when we start perimenopause? Like, okay, I got my career, I got my house, I got my partner, I got my kids. And then what? And the beautiful thing about that is that we do get to write that. The other beautiful thing about that is that we are the first generation that is in the limelight of what is social media, where we can redefine that for the generations to come. And I do believe there was a time long ago when it was something that was respected. We didn't just turn into a senior citizen that was a burden on society that now isn't a sex symbol, so now doesn't matter because you're not procreating, which is what you're supposed to do. We were defined as goddesses, as elders, as the the ones who retained the elixir of life, the blood that we no longer bleed each month, which means we held the wisdom inside of ourselves. And therefore, we had that to pass on to our generations to make sure, like for the longevity of our species. We're the ones that are to do that. Great question. And two-part answer in that question. First part is, you're right, there is a part that's really sad. Just like any change, when you're leaving a job, excuse me, when you're leaving a job and you're going to a new job, there's a part of you that's sad that you're leaving the people that you were with, the persona that you built, and you're moving to a new job, but there's something happy about it, right? Like any kind of change. And there's always that dark hallway that you have to walk through that's really hard to walk through, and many people are scared of change and are not ready to embrace it. So when it comes to menopause, the thing that is sad, in my opinion, I like to call an identity crisis. So when you have decided to be, and let's just say for an example, a wife and a mother, and we'll just leave it at that, and then all of a sudden your kids are growing and they're leaving, and you and your partner all of a sudden are back together again, just the two of you, and you find yourself like, I am a different person, they are a different person, and you're going through all of these changes. There's certain pieces of your identity, and whatever your situation looks like, obviously it can be different. You can be going through perimenopause while your kids are going through puberty. Like it's the craziest time in your life to be going through it. But there's these identities that need to be grieved. And grief is another thing in our culture that we don't look at. We don't have practices like much of the Eastern culture has, where death is sacred, death is a passing into something beautiful. We say we do, but then we don't talk about it. We're not supposed to grieve for as long as it takes. We just don't have a culture that nurtures that grief. And within ourselves, as we become different people along the journey, I believe that we need to honor ourselves and take the time to grieve those identities. For example, I was a six-figure corporate, I had a six-figure corporate job, and I left that job to become this midlife coach. And in that process, I didn't realize that I had to grieve that identity. I had such a hard time transitioning, but when I stopped and looked at who I was and what I did, and how proud I was of the things that I did, and how sad I was of the things that I wouldn't have anymore in that space, I was able to move forward easier. And so we need to grieve the fact that we are no longer the one that everyone is looking at because we're so beautiful, which obviously I think, or maybe not obviously, but I truly believe that women are beautiful at all phases of life. But many women think, I'm no longer young, so I'm no longer looked at, and they may need to grieve that piece of who they are. Or my children are now gone, and women experience empty nest. But I believe that if they grieve that piece of their identity of being a mother and honor it, and then move into who they're becoming, I think that's the piece that's missing. So I think that's the sad piece, and we're not taught that. Obviously, that could be different for other people, and that's just my perspective. But so that's the first part of your question. That's the sad piece. And your second part of your question was, how do you look at the happy parts of menopause? So it's interesting. When we are young, before we become a woman, we have very few hormones. Then we become a woman, we have all these hormones. And then when we go into menopause, we go back to having very few hormones. They're almost like they were when we were a child, a little bit different, but we're also a little bit different. We have this wisdom. And yet women are grasping for, I need to still have those, what I like to call doing hormones. And that woman phase is our doing phase. It's our creating phase. And whether like our womb space is our creative space. It's where we create life. It's where we create whatever we're giving to the world. And that doesn't mean that you're not a woman if you don't have children or you're not using that womb space. It means that in that time when we are in our woman phase, we're doing. And now we get to be being. We get to be human beings instead of human doings. And that in itself, for me, is amazing. It's different, and I needed to grieve who I was before, but it's amazing. And then, much like when we're children and we're walking through life and we're looking at the flowers and the birds and the trees, and we're so in awe with how big the world is and how wonderful the world is, we now have a chance to be back in that space where we can be in awe. We can do gardening and meditating and whatever active activities we want to do. Like for people like me, it's dirt biking and mountain biking and skiing and more adventure or more adrenaline sort of things. But now I have the time and space to do that. I have the wisdom, I have the strength in my body, and it's my own now. And so I think that curiosity and that awe is really important. I believe that women go through two rites of passage. At first, we are a child. And some people say mother, maiden, crone, but I have that like witch wound where I'm scared to say the word crone because then people might think, it's so interesting. It's so interesting how that fear goes so deeply, even when you're teaching this stuff. So that first phase is that child phase, and then you come into your first moon time, and then you become a woman, and that is your second self. So your child is your curious wonder, in love with the world, exploring the big possibilities of this playground that we live on. And then the second part is the doing, the human doing, the woman, the becoming all the things that we've already spoke about. And just like I said before, the third part is that the happily ever after, the wise woman, the queenager, the elder, the whatever you want to call that phase of your life. Okay, what are you going to do? And you have to plan that. It's like anything. You can't get a job that you don't plan for, whether it's just buying an outfit to hand out resumes and printing out a resume. Like everything we do, we have to plan for, and we don't plan for any of that. We also live in a society that glorifies, how do I say this? Doing great things. We're supposed to do great things. It's not okay to be average, which is interesting if you think about it and look at it quite closely. Because if we're just trying to be average, because average is where we want to be, and how does that sit with you when I say, wow, you're so average? Not good, right? But then if you have to be above average, and someone else has to be above average, and the whole society has to be above average, there's no win, there's no top, there's no ceiling to that. We just keep going. There's a great, I think it's a TED Talks on self-compassion versus self-confidence, I think it is. And she talks about that, and it makes so much sense. We teach that we teach striving for excellence, but if the bar of excellence is always being raised, then we're chasing happiness. We're never happy because there's always people that are better, and we're always comparing ourselves to other rather than looking at who we are within ourselves. I think you need to fall in love with mediocrity. I think you need to fall in love with having an average life. I think you need to fall in love with chopping wood or sweeping the floor or gardening, or just every single moment that we have being alive in these levels that we have had the advantage to make it to. I mean, really, every single one of us wants to go through menopause because, as I like to say, the alternative is grave. So we made it here. So just being in love with the ordinary, the everyday things that we're doing, instead of always striving for this unachievable excellence, those mediocre things that make us feel good. Have you ever gone to, say, the grocery store, and there's this guy, for example, that is in the meat department, and he's back there chopping meat, and he's like 50 years old, and that's his job. But every time you go in there, he like raises your energy, and he's like Joe the Butcher. He's just Joe the Butcher. He's not ever done anything else in his life. That's what he does. But in every single thing that he's doing, he just emanates this magnetic energy that makes you feel so good. Have you met people like that are doing their average? Well, strive for that. Those things that make you feel good. I run women through a 6-week program called Midlife Mastery. And each of the weeks takes them from thinking about what menopause is to basically going through each week is a different step with 5 different lessons in it to get to what you want your menopausal years to look like. And I teach that through, I have everything in like an online course where I have videos in there and I have worksheets and exercises for them. And then each week we meet and we talk. So that's my program for menopause right now. The first thing I would say to them is, do you actually look in the mirror? Because most of the time that's a lie. They say, I don't recognize myself anymore. But yet you ask someone to stare into the mirror for a minute into their own eyes, and they either won't or they can't without breaking down and crying. And so I say, stop, look at yourself, because that wise woman is within you. She's begging for you to see her. She's begging so badly that she is pouring out these symptoms in your body, telling you, giving you the signs. Hey, we're changing. I'm here. See me, love me, know me. But we don't take the time to actually look in the mirror. And I do believe, and this isn't a shameless plug or self-promotion, but I do believe that we cannot see it when we're in it. And so we need outside help. And, you know, as a life coach, I truly believe that I'm a coach. And what is a coach? When we think coach, we think sports, right? We think here's these athletes, and the athletes are the ones doing the work. The athletes are the ones that have the struggles. But in order to achieve excellence, they're already good at it. But in order to achieve excellence, every single Olympian has a coach. And we are not taught to tap into our power, to have self-growth and emotional intelligence and to grow that. So we're not taught to have a coach. We're not taught to look for outside help. We're not, because we would be way too powerful if we did that. I mean, you take an athlete, you give them a coach, and they can become an Olympian. You take a woman who is going through perimenopause, and you can watch this video and hear all these things and be like, that sounds amazing. And the next day, you're right back into the 50 to 60,000 thoughts that you have every single day that are the same ones as yesterday because you haven't carved the new neurological pathways. So I believe there is things that we can do on our own, but I do not believe that we can do everything on our own. I believe you need a coach or a therapist or a counselor or a breathwork practitioner or a sleep therapist or a group of women who are connecting in a positive, moving forward way. And that can be scary too, because there is bad coaches and bad therapists and bad groups of women who, aren't moving in the direction that they need to be moving. But I just don't think it's something that we can do alone. And one of the things that we have been taught as women is that we can do everything. We can spin all the plates at once. We can have career, we can keep the house clean, we can look good, we can make sure that we have amazing sex with our partner, we can raise our kids are going to be perfect. Like, it used to take an entire community to do that. And now we're supposed to do it all on our own. And so women walk into perimenopause and suddenly they're like, I can't do this. Like, I'm overwhelmed. And it's because I do think you need help to do it. We're not supposed to do it alone. If you were to take a pile of sand, okay, you have this pile of sand here. And what is the pile of sand made up of? It's made up of grains of sand. But when did that pile become a pile? Was it at 2 grains, 5 grains, 10 grains? And that is so much like what our life is like. And it's so interesting to me when people say, I can't recognize myself. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm like, cool, let's figure it out. Like, let's plan who you are now. Because in our life, we change. And much like that sand turning into a pile, when is the time in your timeline that you changed from one person to another? Because when you look back, you were a baby, you were a toddler, you were an independent toddler, you were a preschool child, you were an elementary child, a primary child, you were all of these things up to an adult. But then in your adult phase, those are easy to name, but in your adult phase, who you were in these years and who you were in these years and who you were in these years are different people. So why all of a sudden are you like, oh, someone different? As if it's a surprise that life isn't a growth chart, that you're not supposed to be different people. Like, yes, you're not a baby anymore. Yes, you're not a prepubescent child. Yes, you're not a young mother. Is it that we don't have enough words to explain who we are? Is it that when our hormones drop, we're like, I don't understand because our chemistry is different and we're just not used to it yet? Is it that we are grasping so hard to what it is that our patriarchal society tells us that we are? And with that black curtain, like we're after, but we're not going to look at it, that we're confused about who we are because we're supposed to grow. If you think you're too old to figure it out, that's all you have. I mean, everything in life is nothing but a circumstance. It's neutral. What you think about it determines how you feel about it, and how you feel about it determines the actions and reactions that you have. And habitually, when you do those same actions and reactions over and over, they become a part of your personality, which becomes your personal reality. So at the root of that, here's the situation. I'm old. Here's the thought. I'm too old to do this. Okay. Then you feel this way, you feel like shit because you're too old, and you act like you're old, and the things in your life show you that you're old because your reticular activation system, your personal internal Google in your brain says, let's look for things that tell me I'm old. So, I mean, when people say that to me, I'm just like, then you are. Well, I don't want to be. Okay, well, then that's different, because we can look at changing that thought so that we have a different feeling, so we have a different action, so we have a different reaction, so we have a different personality and a different personal reality. Well, we were put into schools and then put into jobs, and we are taught that the most important thing is looking good and being excellent. When really, if our world, I believe, could stop and focus on emotional intelligence, it would be a different place. I was listening to a book the other day, and this guy was talking about how important in healing, any type of healing, genetics, lifestyle, attitude, and diet are. Okay. And so I made up this cute little meme that was like, I'm going to introduce to the world glad menopause, because there's 4 parts to it, to any healing, to any transition. G, genetics. Let's just say, for argument's sake, because I'm not a neuroscientist, that genetics you can't change. Okay. That leaves lifestyle, attitude, and diet. That leaves 3 out of 4 of those categories that we do have control over. It doesn't mean I need to eat better or I need to take HRT, but those go into those categories. So lifestyle is sleep, meditation, exercise, your friends, the people, your social network that you're hanging out with, how you're living your life. Attitude is the psychological and the spiritual aspect of it. You need to have a faith in something bigger than yourself. And I'm not saying you have to believe in God or the universe or whatever specifically, but you have to believe that you're part of something bigger. That's that spiritual piece. And as we move into our third self in the second half of life, we know where we're going. We're going to die. So having that faith is really important. And I know that sounds, harsh, but it's true. And the psychological part is the thinking piece. And people skip over it because they're like, what can I take? That is the number one thing. Am I normal? Okay, cool. What can I take? And that comes into the diet. Your diet is the food that you're taking, the medicine that you're taking, the supplements that you're taking, the media that you're consuming, the music that you're consuming, the books that you're consuming, all of the things that you're putting into yourself. And people go, well, I can't sleep. Okay, well, there's sleep therapists, but what does the whole picture look like? And where can you just focus on that one tiny little thing right now? If it's sleep, then focus on the sleep, but know that you're a holistic person that is built up of genetics, lifestyle, attitude, and diet. And it's not just one thing. And that it is a growth chart. We are just constantly working on all of the different things. And it's just tiny little chunks, tiny little steps. Well, what's next? It doesn't have to be overwhelming. You have so much more control than you think you do. But you're not going to heal yourself by saying, can't sleep and I'm so mad on a computer in a group where other people are like, me too. And then you carry on with your day and don't do anything. As we go through our lives of being women, human doings, we we brush stuff off for the sake of harmony. We're like, oh, that doesn't matter. And where does that go? We store it. We store it in our bodies. We store it in our psyche. And for those of us, I believe, and this is not a medical statement, just my belief, that the more that we just push off, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not mad. I'm just a little sad about what just happened. Like we say these things and they're not really true, and they get stored in our bodies and they get stored in our psyches. And then we come into what is perimenopause, and we start to lose those harmonizing hormones that we have. And all of a sudden we're angry. And we're like, all of these things come, and this debt collector comes back in perimenopause and is like, okay, we're going to deal with this now. And people are like, wow, women get crazy. Anger is something that you need to partner with, because nothing has ever been done. No change has ever been made without someone getting pissed off, because that anger is passion. And we take anger and we're like, anger's bad, especially for women. You can take a man in a room and he'll be super angry in a boardroom, and everyone like looks at him and has respect for him and is like, wow, something needs to change. Look at his anger coming out. And you take a woman in that same room and she gets mad and they're like, crisis, breakdown, lock her up. That girl's crazy. But when we're angry about something, it is the catalyst to change. We don't even do anything until we're angry enough about it. So maybe the answer is pissing those women off enough that they want to make a change. Maybe you should say, like I do, oh, okay, yeah, you are too old because you think you are. They're like, what do you mean I'm too old? Well, you're the one that said it. And then that anger can kick in and maybe they'll do something about it. And sadness, what is sadness? They try to teach us in the Pixar movie, Inside Out. There's all these feelings. They're supposed to be there. We're supposed to feel them. What is sadness telling you? Sadness is telling you you need to take some time for yourself. You need to grieve this part that's inside of you. We need to get into a quiet space, and we need to be alone right now, or maybe we need to be with someone right now, and we need to either talk or we need to cry or what is wrong with that? Nothing is wrong with that until we think, again, here's sadness, there's a circumstance, and we think this is terrible. And so we avoid the feeling. Have the same self-compassion for yourself that you have for others. Stop, look in the mirror, look straight into the mirror, and set a timer if you need to for a minute, and look into your eyes and your soul and ask yourself, if this was someone else's eyes I was staring into, what would I say to them? And why am I not giving that grace to the one person I'm going to spend the most time with? Stand in front of the mirror. Tell yourself, if you have to, for 7 days, 3 things each day that are nice about yourself. And the next day, say the 3 things and then say 3 more, so that by the end of it, you've said 21 nice things to yourself. And even if you can't do that, that's too much, you can't commit to that, stand naked in front of the mirror and look at your body and look at it in a way that is different from what society has said. Look at it in a way of this sensory being that smells, tastes, feels, hears, sees everything, and is just out there in the world feeling it. And think about all of the things that you've done to this body, the ways you've abused it, the ways that you have mentally, verbally, physically abused it, poisoned it. And look at it and think, you're still here. Like, you're still here after everything, all the scars, all the wounds, everything. And here you are screaming at me, telling me that something has to change through what is the symptoms that are happening. And think for a second about how amazing it is that your body is there, because this is who you're going to have to partner with. It is your mind and your spirit and your body that you're partnering with. And we're so separated from looking at ourselves in our own eyes and from being in our own bodies because we've learned to hate them so much. How do we expect to even look at the way that I have described this wonderful life that we're moving into? The woman, she changes. Instead of creating life, it's like she's creating this new life inside of her. And I could see how, that would be scary and confusing when you don't know what that means. But then all of a sudden there would be that shadow period or that sad period that we were talking about. But then all of a sudden you change into this this unleashed wise woman, this being that holds now the elixir of life within them, which I believe is wisdom.